ascend to the rank of Inquisitor within the God Emperor's holy ordos, a mortal must first serve as an interrogator. They are the students of the shadows, the scalpels utilized by the Imperium to excise the cancer of heresy from the human soul. We are taught that these men and women are the ultimate arbiters of objective reality, blessed with the divine mandate to burn away the lies of chaos and expose the unvarnished truth of the galaxy. But what happens when a mind spends decades dissecting deceit? What happens when the architect of confessions realizes that pain can manufacture any reality he desires? He did not merely suspect the galaxy of treason, he systematically murdered the very concept of objective truth. Today, on Huckrift, we dissect the ultimate psychological collapse of an Imperial interrogator. We will explore the terrifying terminal velocity of institutionalized paranoia and reveal the tragedy of a man who tortured the universe for so long he completely forgot what reality actually looked like. To comprehend the profound cognitive decay of the interrogator, we must first analyze the suffocating epistemology of the Holy Inquisition. The ordos operate on a fundamental, unyielding axiom. Baseline human interaction is an intricate, multi-layered construct of deception. In the 41st millennium, the truth is not a passive state of being. It is an active, highly dangerous weapon. Heretics mask their dark liturgies behind the veneer of pious compliance. Genestealer cults wear the biological faces of loyal, hard-working citizens. Demons of the warp literally weave their physical forms from the threads of mortal lies. The interrogator is conditioned from his very first day of apprenticeship to view the visible universe not as a reality to be observed, but as a complex cryptographic cipher that must be violently decoded. The primary theater of this decoding process is the interrogation sanctum. It is here that the interrogator ceases to be a mere investigator and transforms into a psychological surgeon. He does not simply ask questions. He utilizes a terrifying arsenal of neuro-whips, psychochem truth serums, and telepathic intrusion to systematically dismantle the subject's cognitive defenses. The physical agony inflicted is merely the crude mechanism used to bypass the conscious mind. The true torture is the agonizing deconstruction of the subject's memory and identity. The interrogator strips away the layers of a human soul like a man peeling a rotting fruit, searching for the core of absolute undeniable heresy. He believes that beneath the flesh and the fear, the ultimate truth lies waiting in the dark. However, the architecture of extreme torment introduces a catastrophic philosophical variable into the interrogation process. The interrogator learns, with cold, empirical certainty, that when a human body is pushed past the absolute threshold of biological agony, the mind will fracture. And when a mind fractures, the subject will no longer tell the objective truth. They will tell the interrogator whatever he wants to hear just to make the pain stop. A loyal, perfectly innocent administratum scribe, when subjected to 72 hours of sustained excruciator webs, will readily confess to leading a localized chaos cult, providing meticulously detailed, entirely fabricated timelines of their dark rituals. The interrogator knows this. He understands that pain is a miraculous author of fiction. This realization is the genesis of his existential doom. If pain can manufacture a flawless confession, then a confession is no longer empirical evidence of guilt. It is merely a symptom of broken endurance. Therefore, the interrogator cannot stop when the subject finally admits to heresy. He must continue the psychological dismantling, searching for the lie within the confession, and then the lie within the subsequent retraction. The interrogation ceases to be a pursuit of a definitive answer and devolves into an infinite, recursive descent into the subject's breaking psyche. The interrogator becomes trapped in a labyrinth of induced hallucinations, frantically trying to separate the memories the subject actually lived from the memories the torture device forcibly planted. Eventually, this localized paranoia violently bleeds out of the dungeon and infects his perception of the broader Imperium. When the interrogator walks through the gilded halls of a hive city, he no longer sees loyal citizens engaged in commerce and worship. He looks at a smiling child, a praying priest, or a diligent enforcer, and his corrupted logic engines do not register innocence. He processes their behavior as a highly sophisticated, flawlessly executed cover story that simply hasn't been subjected to the correct voltage yet. The concept of innocence is completely eradicated from his philosophical dictionary. Innocence is no longer a state of purity. It is simply a designation for a heretic who is temporarily successfully managing their deception. This is the silent, devastating death of objective reality within the interrogator's mind. He has spent his entire adult life utilizing trauma to manipulate the truth, only to realize that he has completely lost the baseline metric for what the truth originally was. If every smile is a mask, every prayer is a cipher, and every confession is just a biologically mandated fabrication to escape pain, then the universe is entirely hollow. He is the ultimate tragic product of the Inquisition's methodology, a man who was commanded to find the needle of truth in a haystack of lies, who ultimately concluded that the needle does not exist and the hay is actively plotting to kill him. The most terrifying trajectory of institutionalized paranoia is its inevitable, violent inversion. A human mind cannot sustain a state of absolute predatory distrust toward the external universe without eventually turning that exact same analytical machinery inward. When the interrogator has spent a decade proving that every saint is a sinner in disguise, and that every loyal vow is a carefully constructed psychological trap, he must inevitably confront the most horrifying variable in the equation: his own mind. If the galaxy is fundamentally composed of flawless deception and sleeper agents, by what arrogant, illogical metric does he assume that his own memories are genuine? The interrogation chamber is quietly relocated from the subterranean dungeon to the cold, reflective silence of his own bathroom mirror. He begins to view his own biography not as a fixed historical record, but as a highly suspicious, potentially fabricated backstory. He remembers his childhood on a distant hive world, the face of his mother, the grueling trials of the scholar progenium. But the interrogator knows, with chilling professional certainty, that a mid-level telepath of the Alpha Legion or a gene sect Magos can seamlessly implant a lifetime of false memories into a human cortex in a matter of hours. How does he empirically prove that he actually lived those years? He cannot. The memories feel warm and authentic, but he has extracted identical weeping confessions of authentic childhoods from cultists who were grown in a cloning vat 3 weeks prior. His own past becomes a hostile crime scene, contaminated by the terrifying possibility of external authorship. Driven by this suffocating cognitive dissonance, the interrogator begins to subject himself to the very methodologies he inflicts upon the heretic. He does not utilize the excruciator racks, for physical damage would impede his duties, but he initiates a brutal campaign of psychological auto-interrogation. He subjects himself to extreme, localized sleep deprivation, fasting for weeks at a time to lower his own mental firewalls. He consumes mild psychotropics and neuroinhibitors, intentionally inducing a state of vulnerability, and then violently cross-examines his own fragmented thoughts in the dark. He is not seeking spiritual penitence. He is actively trying to crack his own psyche, desperately hunting for a hidden, heretical subroutine buried within his own subconscious. He wants to see if the man in the mirror bleeds a lie. This internal warfare necessitates a grotesque archiving of his own cognitive decay. He begins to maintain deeply encrypted, heavily ciphered journals, documenting his daily observations and internal monologues. However, the paranoia instantly consumes this practice. When he opens the data slate the next morning to review his own writings, he reads the words with intense, paralyzing suspicion. He analyzes the syntax and the vocabulary of his own diary entries, searching for hidden codes or subtle shifts in ideological alignment. He assumes that the man who wrote the entry yesterday was compromised, perhaps subtly influenced by a passing warp ghost or a microtoxin in the air recyclers. His identity violently fractures into two distinct entities occupying the same skull: the relentless, uncompromising interrogator and the eternally guilty suspect. The practical application of his daily life grinds to a suffocating, mathematical halt. The simple act of consuming a meal becomes a paralyzing exercise in threat assessment. He looks at a glass of Amasec and calculates the probability of a venom toxin. When he takes a sip and feels a slight bitterness, his mind violently spirals. Is the bitterness the natural flavor of the vintage, or is it a molecular poison designed to mimic the vintage? Or, vastly more terrifying, is the bitterness a psychosomatic hallucination induced by a localized telepathic hex designed to make him think he is poisoned, thereby distracting him from the actual threat? He is completely paralyzed by the infinite, recursive branching of potential deceits. He cannot act because every action is based on sensory input, and his sensory input has been deemed structurally invalid. Here, the foundational bedrock of human consciousness is entirely pulverized. The ancient philosopher's absolute truth, "I think, therefore I am," is violently inverted by the Ordo's methodology. For the interrogator, the axiom becomes, "I think, therefore my thoughts are susceptible to manipulation, therefore I am compromised." If the mind is the only instrument available to measure the objective reality of the universe, and the instrument has empirically determined that it cannot be trusted, there is no floor left to stand on. He is eternally falling through a void of his own making, a prisoner locked inside the darkest, most impenetrable cell in the galaxy, a mind that has found itself guilty of existing. The audience of this psychological tragedy naturally assumes that this severe cognitive collapse would mark the end of the interrogator's career. Surely, a man who cannot trust his own reflection, who hesitates for 3 hours before drinking a glass of water, is a broken tool. One would expect his mentor, the presiding Inquisitor Lord, to identify this catastrophic mental fragmentation, declare the apprentice unfit for duty, and quietly authorize a bolt round to the back of the head. But the Inquisition does not operate on the mundane, logical metrics of the Administratum or the Astra Militarum. The Ordos do not value stable, rational minds. They value weapons that operate on the exact same frequency as the nightmare they are fighting. To the Inquisitor Lord, the apprentice is not breaking, he is finally ripening. The imperial truth, the rigid, dogmatic assertion of science, rationality, and objective history, is a necessary shield for the trillions of unwashed masses. It keeps the factory workers sane and the soldiers marching forward. But the Inquisition operates beyond the shield, deep within the radioactive, sanity-shattering core of the galactic conflict. An Inquisitor cannot be bound by the rigid constraints of empirical evidence or objective reality, because the warp actively despises and routinely violates both concepts. An Inquisitor who waits for absolute verifiable proof of a demonic incursion is an Inquisitor who will arrive 3 weeks after the planet has been dragged into the immaterium. The mentor deliberately engineered this psychological collapse because paranoia is not a side effect of the job. It is the fundamental qualification. The mentor watches his apprentice shivering in the dark, obsessively cross-referencing his own diaries, and feels a cold, paternal pride. The grueling, decades-long immersion in the interrogation pits was never truly about extracting information from heretics. The heretics were merely the whetstone used to sharpen the blade. The true objective was to entirely shatter the interrogator's reliance on the physical universe. The mentor needs a successor who does not believe in innocence, because innocence is a tactical blind spot. He needs a successor who views an empty, entirely quiet room not as a sanctuary, but as a flawlessly executed ambush. The complete death of the interrogator's sanity is the exact threshold required for promotion. The ceremonial ascension is a masterpiece of dark, cosmic irony. The broken, trembling interrogator is brought before the conclave of the Ordos. He is presented with the inquisitorial rosette, the ultimate symbol of absolute, unquestionable imperial authority. It is a badge that grants the bearer the power to requisition entire fleets, execute planetary governors, and order the exterminatus of billions of souls in the name of the Emperor's truth. But as the interrogator reaches out to take the rosette, his mind is screaming in a polyphonic chorus of suspicion. Is the rosette real? Are these lords actually demons wearing flesh masks, testing his spiritual acuity? Is this entire ceremony a hallucination induced by a neurotoxin slipped into his recaf 3 years ago? He accepts the badge, his face an impassive, scarred mask, while his soul writhes in the agony of absolute uncertainty. The promotion is not a triumph. It is the final, heavy locking of his psychological prison door. He is granted unlimited power at the exact mathematical moment. He loses the ability to comprehend what he is using it on. He is elevated to the status of a demigod, officially sanctioned to be the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner of reality, despite being a man who fundamentally believes that reality is a myth manufactured by his enemies. He is released into the galaxy as a fully ordained Inquisitor, and he is vastly more terrifying than any Chaos Warlord or Tyrannid Hive Tyrant. A Hive Tyrant wants to consume your biomass. Its motives are predictable. A Chaos Lord wants to offer your skull to Khorne. His logic, however twisted, is linear, but the newly forged Inquisitor operates on a terrifying, unmoored calculus of hyper-vigilant instinct. He will order the orbital bombardment of a completely peaceful, deeply loyal agri-world, not because he found evidence of heresy, but because the planetary compliance reports were too perfect, and absolute perfection is the undeniable signature of a highly sophisticated Tzeentchian conspiracy. He has become the apex predator of the dark, a blind man wielding a flaming sword, enthusiastically burning the galaxy to ash to find a truth he no longer believes in. To observe this shattered Inquisitor operating within the broader galaxy is to witness the terrifying, catastrophic weaponization of logical fallacies. A standard, rational agent of the Ordos approaches a planetary investigation by actively searching for the physiological and sociological symptoms of corruption. They look for unauthorized subterranean excavations, inexplicable spikes in violent crime, or the subtle mutated iconography of Genestealer cults sprayed on manufactorum walls. They seek empirical anomalies, but the paranoid Inquisitor operates on an entirely inverted spectrum of threat assessment. When he arrives on a seemingly peaceful, perfectly compliant imperial world, he does not look for the anomaly. To his fractured mind, the unbroken, tranquil normalcy of the planet is the ultimate screaming anomaly. He subscribes to the catastrophic philosophical doctrine of the null evidence fallacy. In his labyrinthine logic, the absolute absence of heresy is impossible, because humanity is inherently biologically flawed. Therefore, if he cannot find a chaos cult operating in the underhive, it does not mean the cult is absent. means the cult is so magnificently sophisticated, so terrifyingly embedded within the highest echelons of the planetary government, that they have successfully scrubbed all empirical data of their existence. A disorganized amateur cult leaves blood on the altar. A true existential threat leaves a perfectly spotless flaw. Consequently, the cleaner the planet's record, the more orbital firepower the Inquisitor mathematically justifies requisitioning. This absolute destruction of rational causality leads to the brutal interrogation of coincidence. The Inquisitor walks through a crowded plaza and observes a planetary minister stumble slightly on a marble staircase. A normal human recognizes a minor lapse in physical coordination. The Inquisitor perceives a highly encrypted kinesthetic transmission. He deduces that the stumble was a deliberate, synchronized signal directed at a dormant sleeper cell in the crowd. The minister is immediately apprehended by stormtroopers, dragged into the silent, soundproofed belly of the inquisitorial cruiser and subjected to agonizing neural lacerations until he is forced to invent a complex, entirely fictional narrative that perfectly aligns with the Inquisitor's hallucination. The Inquisitor tortures reality until it matches his nightmare. The logistical collateral damage of this methodology is astronomical. He wastes the sacred, desperately needed resources of the Imperium, chasing phantoms born of his own synaptic misfires. He will unilaterally divert an entire Astra Militarum battle fleet, leaving a neighboring sector highly vulnerable to a real Orc invasion, simply because he analyzed the orbital trajectories of a planet's 3 moons and decided their alignment roughly resembled a deeply obscure, forbidden runic cipher he dreamt about during a week of intentional sleep deprivation. He wages total apocalyptic war against the architecture of random chance, entirely convinced that coincidence is a myth invented by Tzeentch to mask his grand design. He applies the concept of confession by exhaustion, not just to individual prisoners, but to entire global populations. He does not execute targeted surgical strikes against suspected heretics. Instead, he subjects the entire planet to deliberate psychological starvation. He imposes impossible production tithes, enforces draconian martial law, and initiates random, terrifying blockades of vital food supplies. He believes that by applying unbearable, suffocating stress to the society, the hidden heretics will eventually crack under the pressure and reveal themselves. He tortures the economy, the culture, and the spirit of the world, staring at the suffering masses with unblinking, expectant eyes, waiting to see who breaks first. The ultimate philosophical nightmare of his methodology is its status as a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Inquisitor arrives on a stable world seeking a chaos rebellion that does not exist. By dismantling the planetary infrastructure, executing innocent leaders, and inflicting profound systemic trauma upon the populace, he actively creates the exact conditions required for chaos to take root. Driven to absolute screaming desperation by the Inquisitor's cruelty, the previously loyal citizens have no choice but to turn to the ruinous powers for salvation from the Emperor's justice. The Inquisitor burns the orchard to the ground to kill a suspected weed, and then proudly points to the ashes as absolute empirical proof that the soil was corrupted all along. No Inquisitor operates in a vacuum. To project his terrifying authority, he must surround himself with a specialized retinue: savants, sanctioned psychers, death cult assassins, and hardened stormtroopers. But to serve in the warband of the paranoid Inquisitor is to exist in a uniquely agonizing psychological purgatory. The acolytes recognize very quickly that the most profound, existential threat to their survival is not the roaring tyrannid swarm or the insidious demon of the warp. The greatest threat in the galaxy is the silent, brooding master sitting on the command throne of their own vessel, They live within the blast radius of a decaying mind. The atmosphere within the inquisitorial cruiser is one of perpetual, hyper-vigilant terror. The acolytes must aggressively police their own micro-expressions, their breathing patterns, and their casual vocabulary. A heavy sigh of exhaustion after a 40-hour data slate review might be interpreted by the Inquisitor as a telepathic transmission of surrender to the archenemy. A hesitation of 1.5 seconds before answering a direct question is logged as a symptom of internal, treasonous calculation. The crew does not converse. They exchange highly sanitized, meticulously rehearsed data points, terrified that a misplaced joke or a metaphor might result in their immediate relocation to the excruciator racks. They are prisoners walking on a tightrope made of razor wire, performing for a judge who has forgotten the rules. To survive the Inquisitor's relentless, predatory need for guilt, the acolytes develop a terrifying, grotesque psychological defense mechanism, the preemptive confession. They quickly realize that absolute innocence is a death sentence, because the Inquisitor views absolute innocence as a flawlessly executed lie. Therefore, the acolytes must ensure they are never entirely clean. They actively invent minor, meaningless sins and intentionally sabotage small, irrelevant protocols just to have something to confess. They will approach the Inquisitor and admit to feelings of minor lethargy during morning prayers, or confess to harboring a fleeting thought of insubordination. By feeding him these small, controlled morsels of manufactured guilt, they satiate his paranoia, desperately hoping to distract him from tearing their minds completely apart to find a larger conspiracy. The psychic toll on the sanctioned telepaths within the retinue is particularly devastating. Astropaths and primaris psychers are tasked with scanning the minds of planetary populations to detect the taint of chaos. When they scan a loyal city and report that the minds below are pure, the Inquisitor does not accept the data. He accuses the psychers of incompetence or, vastly more dangerously, of being complicit in the cover-up. He demands they push deeper, past the safe limits of their psychic endurance. To avoid execution, the psychers learn to actively hallucinate heresy. They intentionally misinterpret the ambient, mundane anxieties of the civilian population as the whispering of demons. They betray their own psychic gifts, manufacturing the shadows their master demands to see, ultimately driving themselves into genuine, irreversible madness. The attrition rate of the Inquisitor's most loyal bodyguards exposes the absolute, tragic absurdity of his condition. The stormtroopers who shield his body with their own flesh are routinely, unceremoniously purged. If a squad of bodyguards successfully escorts the Inquisitor through a horrific, seemingly unsurvivable ambush, he does not reward them with medals or commendations. He executes them. His fractured logic engines dictate that their survival was mathematically improbable. Therefore, the enemy must have intentionally spared them to serve as dormant sleeper agents. Loyalty is rewarded with an executioner's bolt, because flawless loyalty is deemed too perfect to be natural. He sits at the absolute center of a vast, terrifying intelligence network, completely isolated by his own design. He is surrounded by terrified sycophants, broken telepaths, and traumatized soldiers who do nothing but reflect his own delusions back at him. He has successfully built a flawless, hermetically sealed echo chamber of pure, distilled paranoia. He is entirely cut off from the reality of the Imperium he swore to protect. He rules over a kingdom of ghosts, a god of a completely fabricated hell, entirely unaware that the most dangerous reality-warping heresy in the sector is currently happening inside his own skull. The terminal velocity of institutionalized paranoia ultimately demands a physical confrontation with the architect of deception itself. In the twilight years of his catastrophic crusade, the Inquisitor manages to achieve the impossible. he successfully captures a Greater Daemon of Tzeentch, the Lord of Change. To accomplish this, he purposefully sacrifices 3 entire regiments of elite Tempestus scions and a specialized strike force of Grey Knights, casually spending their lives to spring his trap. Then, in a stroke of ultimate madness, he immediately executes the handful of surviving heroes, accusing them of being tainted by proximity. Having secured his prize, he binds the entity of pure, warp-born deceit within a heavily warded stasis vault deep inside his ghost ship. For a standard Inquisitor, this would be the pinnacle of a terrifying career, a chance to interrogate the very source of galactic heresy. The demon, a creature composed entirely of shifting paradoxes and multidimensional lies, expects to engage in a grand metaphysical duel of wits. It prepares to weave a labyrinth of half-truths designed to slowly, agonizingly corrupt the Inquisitor's soul. But the demon severely underestimates the density of the Inquisitor's madness. When the interrogation begins, the demon offers a whispered prophecy concerning the fall of terror, a highly sophisticated lie designed to induce despair. The Inquisitor does not react with horror, nor does he invoke the Emperor's protection. He simply looks at the towering, multi-eyed horror and accuses it of being an undercover operative of the Officio Assassinorum, sent by the High Lords of Terror to test his loyalty. The demon is profoundly confused. It attempts to reveal maddening, eldritch truths about the nature of the warp. The Inquisitor dismisses these cosmic revelations as a crude, low-budget psychological operation orchestrated by his own mutinous astropaths. This creates a spectacular localized breakdown of the immaterium. Tzeentch is the god of schemes, but a scheme requires the victim to possess a baseline understanding of reality that can be subverted. The Inquisitor possesses no baseline reality. He completely out-paranoias the god of paranoia. He subjects the Greater Daemon to mundane, bureaucratic torture, demanding to know which imperial tax collector hired it. The ancient, immortal entity of chaos, a being that has shattered the minds of space marine librarians, is driven to the brink of absolute metaphysical frustration. It screams the darkest secrets of the universe at him, and the Inquisitor merely writes down, "Suspect is highly uncooperative, continues to employ ridiculous amateur cover story." The demon is not banished by holy light. It voluntarily dissipates back into the warp, simply to escape the agonizing stupidity of the conversation. Having successfully humiliated and dismissed the ultimate manifestation of chaos, the Inquisitor is left completely alone. He has purged his planetary governors. He has executed his retinue. He has orbital bombarded his own supply fleets to prevent theoretical sabotage. He sits upon the command throne of a massive, silent inquisitorial cruiser, drifting listlessly through the void. There is no one left to interrogate. There are no external variables left to suspect, but the engine of paranoia cannot simply be powered down. It is a ravenous, self-sustaining fire, and having consumed the entire visible galaxy, it naturally turns its gaze toward the final, ultimate frontier, the man sitting on the throne. In the suffocating silence of the ghost ship, the Inquisitor arrives at his final, mathematically inevitable deduction. If the entire universe was a flawlessly executed deception, and he was the only entity smart enough to see through it, then his survival was statistically impossible. Why would the grand cosmic conspiracy allow him to live this long? There is only one logical answer. He realizes with a cold, paralyzing dread that he is not the hunter. He is the ultimate sleeper agent. He deduces that his entire crusade, the purges, the executions, the destruction of imperial worlds, was a highly sophisticated subconscious chaos plot engineered to destroy the sector from within. The greatest heretic in the galaxy was hiding perfectly inside his own power armor. Driven by the unyielding absolute fanaticism of his office, he does not hesitate. He descends into his own subterranean interrogation pit, the very chamber where he broke the minds of thousands of innocents. He strips off his rosette, violently straps himself into the heavy iron excruciator chair, and activates the automated neural lacerators. As the agonizing electrical current tears through his cerebral cortex, he begins to aggressively interrogate himself, screaming questions into the empty dark, demanding a confession from his own shattered psyche. Years later, when a Black Templar strike cruiser finally boards the drifting ghost ship, they find his mummified remains still strapped to the chair. The automated data quill beside him has transcribed his final, bloody confession. He successfully tortured himself to death, entirely convinced he had finally saved the Imperium. We observe the tragic, self-inflicted execution of the Inquisitor who tortured reality to death, and we view it as a brilliant, terrifying metaphor for the extremes of the Grimdark universe. We laugh at the dark comedy of a man who out-paranoias a chaos demon, entirely confident that such profound, systemic delusion is safely confined to the pages of a science fiction codex. We close the archives, believing our own perceptions of reality are perfectly grounded. But look closely at the architecture of our modern, hyper-connected paranoia. We exist in an era where trust is treated as a severe intellectual weakness. We are conditioned by algorithms and endless media cycles to perpetually search for the hidden agenda, the secret malice, and the unspoken conspiracy behind every mundane action. We dissect the words of our peers. We aggressively interrogate the motives of our friends, and we build massive digital echo chambers to protect ourselves from the lies of the outside world. We weaponize our skepticism, believing that if we doubt everything, we can never be deceived. But the ultimate tragedy of the Inquisitor holds true for us as well. If you systematically destroy your capacity to trust, you do not become a master of truth. You simply become a prisoner of your own suspicions. When you treat every smile as a mask and every kind gesture as a trap, you eventually isolate yourself on a ghost ship of your own making, completely incapable of experiencing genuine love, connection, or reality. You torture the world until it matches your nightmare. If your mind is exhausted by the endless, paralyzing cycle of modern paranoia, if you are tired of interrogating the shadows in your own life, anchor your reality here. Strike the subscribe rune and break the cycle. Leave a genuine, unencrypted transmission in the archives below to prove you still know how to trust, and share this signal with those who are mistaking their isolation for enlightenment. In a universe obsessed with uncovering the conspiracy, never forget that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to believe. Until next time, guard your sanity, lower your weapons, and remember, a truth found through torture is just a lie wearing a bloody mask.